guys. So yesterday, you were given the assignment with Rosie Revere, Engineer. It was a book you were supposed to read on Epic, and then you were supposed to do the assignment on Edulastic of putting those different events into categories, and they're all categories that were based on the plot roller coaster that the initial lesson on the first video was about. So hopefully you watched the lesson videos before doing the activity so that you are super familiar with the words and vocabulary of what I was talking about. These are nothing new: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, conflict, and problem. These are all things that I've talked to you about several times. They're all things that we've definitely reviewed, and things that we've been going over in fictional text, even in narrative writing and in our reading units. So what I'm going to do for you today is actually go over that book, Rosie Revere, Engineer. I'm going to go over it, and what I have here on this side of the screen is the events from the Edulastic assignment. And I'm going to go over what each one is, and then I'm going to plot it on the story organizer here, the story roller coaster here. I'm going to plot it on here and help you see, so that you can see it more clearly of how it should have gone for you. So this will help you out, those of you who did that yesterday, so that you can see the changes or the differences that you should have had and kind of do a little self-check. All right, so the story is called Rose Revere, Engineer. So first thing I'm going to do is read the story to you. This is the story of Rose Revere, who dreamed of becoming a great engineer. In Lila Greer's classroom at Blue River Creek, young Rosie sat shyly, not daring to speak. So one thing I suggested on the video yesterday, or I believe even in the instructions, I don't remember which one, but anyway, one thing I suggested was that before you started reading, to go to the Edulastic assignment and to write down the different events. So you should have written down the different events. You should have written these events down on a piece of paper. And then what you want to do is actually label them as you're reading. So that's what I'm going to model for you. As a virtual learner, it's really important that you're doing things that are not just on the computer, but also on pencil paper, so that you are getting a more concrete understanding and working with text in different ways than just the computer. So you should be using pencil paper when you're doing these assignments. Again, if I make the suggestion of doing something, you should probably follow that suggestion. I'm going to keep saying that you guys should be doing the same work as our in-seat students. If I had students here in class, this would be an activity that I would do in class with them, and probably 3 more things within that reading time frame. So I want you to understand that, yes, I'm asking you to do some things, and as the year progresses, you're going to have more and more. You're in 4th grade. I got to get you ready for that MAP test in the spring. I got to get you ready for 5th grade next year. My job is to make you a productive member of society. My job is to make sure that you are a good reader and good at, and that you are able to take a problem and solve it using the skills that I'm supposed to be teaching you. So please make sure that you're taking this seriously, and you've got yourself prepared to learn. So if you don't have pencil and paper, I would get one, and I would be writing some of these strategies down as you're watching the video today. So, like I said, this is the different events that are on that Edulastic assignment. If you want to pull that Edulastic assignment up, you can hit that review button and review how you did on it, and then you'll be able to see some of the mistakes that you made as well, just FYI. So if you want to pause the video and go look at that, you can do that as well. All right. So first thing we're going to do is, I just read that first page, and I'm going to look for that event. Rosie Revere sat in Lila Green's classroom. So this is the first event. So I'm going to go ahead and just number them for now, and then I'm going to go back and label them using the plot vocabulary in just a second. But when no one saw her, she peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer's stash. And late at night, Rosie rolled up her sleeves and built in her hideaway under the eaves. So now she's digging in that trash. Let's see. I remember seeing something about that. Oh, here it is. Rosie dug in the trash can to add to her engineer's stash. So that was the second thing that took place. All right. Alone in the attic, the moon high above, dear Rosie made gadgets and gizmos she loved. And when she grew sleepy, she hid her machines far under the bed where they'd never be seen. So she was shy about her inventions, right? And she gave up on sharing them with the world. All right. So she didn't want to do that. Actually, let's save that one. Let's save that one. I'm going to put a mark by it. Like, I'm not sure if that's the right one or not. When Rosie was young, she had not been so shy. She worked with her hair swooping over one eye and made fine inventions for uncles and aunts, a hot dog dispenser, and helium pants. All right, let's make sure that there's... Oh, I think right here. Rosie invented things for people to help them out. So I'm going to put that right here. That was the third event, not that one, because it hasn't really talked about in the book giving up on sharing them with the world. So that was an accident. That's not the one I wanted to mark. That's okay, though. That's what you should be doing as a reader, is really thinking about these things. It's not something that's supposed to be easy. All right. The uncle she loved most was zookeeper Fred. She made him a hat to keep snakes off his head from parts of a fan and some cheddar cheese spray, which everyone knows keeps the pythons away. And when it was finished, young Rosie was proud, but Fred slapped his knee and he chuckled out loud. He laughed till he wheezed and his eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who stood there embarrassed, perplexed, and dismayed. She looked at the cheese hat and then looked away. I love it, Fred hooted. Oh, truly I do. But Rosie Revere knew that could not be true. She stuck that cheese hat on the back of her shelf, and after that day kept the dreams to herself. All right, so this part I know is in the story. Let's see, her uncle, here it is. Rosie's uncle laughed at her when she invented a hat, so that happened next. All right, and then she decided, okay, then Rosie was shy about her inventions and gave up on sharing them with the world. So I actually think and know that this kind of goes with number 4. So I'm actually going to put number 4 there as well, because these two I feel like go together. And I'm going to come back to this one. So I'm going to put a star by it, because that one's a little different. And that's how it went until one autumn day, her oldest relation showed up for a stay. Her great-great-aunt Rose was a true dynamo who'd worked building airplanes a long time ago. She told Rosie tales of the things she had done and goals she had checked off her list one by one. She gave a sad smile as she looked to the sky. The only thrill left on my list is to fly. But time never lingers as long as it seems, and I chalk that one up to an old lady's dreams. That night, as Rosie lay wide-eyed in bed, a daring idea crept into her head. Could she build a gizmo to help her aunt fly? She looked at the cheese hat and said, "No, not I." But questions are tricky and some hold on tight, and this one kept Rosie awake through the night. So when dawn approached and red streaks lit the sky, young Rosie knew just how to make her aunt fly. All right, so I'm going to stop for a second because I remember reading this part. Her aunt came to visit and spoke of her own adventures. So this was the next thing that happened. So I'm going to put a 5 by it. Okay, so that hasn't happened yet. That hasn't happened yet. And then, boom, this happens right here. Rosie decided to try to build something for her aunt, right? But it hasn't all been said yet. She struggled to make the decision, but she knew that was the right thing to do. So this whole part has happened. But this part, the invention ended up crashing. That hasn't happened yet. So let's keep reading. She worked and she worked till the day was half gone, and then hauled her cheese copter out onto the lawn to give her invention a test just to see the ridiculous flop it might turn out to be. So she's still kind of like not real confident in herself. So, strapped into the cockpit, she flipped on the switch. The helio cheese copter sputtered and twitched. Sorry, it's hard to read. It floated a moment and whirled around and round, and then froze for a heartbeat and crashed to the ground. Then Rosie heard laughter and turned round to see the old woman laughing and slapping her knee. She laughed till she wheezed and her eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who thought, "Oh no, never, not ever again will I try to build something to sputter or spin, or build with a lever, a switch, a gear, and never will I be a great engineer." She turned round to leave, but then Great-Great-Aunt Rose grabbed hold of young Rosie and pulled her in close and hugged her and kissed her and started to cry. "You did it! Hooray! It's the perfect first try! This great flop is over. It's time for the next." Young Rosie was baffled, embarrassed, and perplexed. "I failed," said dear Rosie. "It's just made of trash. Didn't you see it? The cheese copter crashed." "Yes," said her great aunt, "it crashed, that is true. But first it did just what it needed to do. Before it crashed, Rosie, before that, it flew. Your brilliant first flop was a raging success. And come on, let's go get busy and on to the next." She handed a notebook to Rosie Revere, who smiled at her aunt as it all became clear. Life might have its failures, but this was not it. The only true failure can come if you quit. So that was the rest of this part right here. And what I felt as I was reading that story was the excitement and the change in Rosie. So that is, I know, the climax. This right here is the climax. It's the most exciting part of the story. It's the turning point for Rosie where she decided to stop giving up and she realized and learned that failure is important. Even the part where she had changed and decided that she was going to build for her aunt, that was a little bit of a change in the story, but it wasn't big enough. It wasn't the biggest part of the story. So that's why it's important to decide on the climax, not until you've really reached that epic turning point. So even when Rosie decided to build that helicopter or build that first thing for her aunt, she still was not confident. She was still worried and still kind of called it, I think in the story, let me go back. She even called it in this part a ridiculous flop. So she still hasn't taken that turn of realizing that she is okay and that she can do great things until this moment. And that's why we know this is the climax of the story. So that's why I'm labeling this the climax of the story. I also know this became clear to me that this is the problem. The biggest problem is the story is not that her aunt can't fly or that her aunt hasn't flying. That's just simply part of the storyline. The problem is that she gave up on herself. She gave up on sharing her inventions and her engineering with the world. And that was the problem in the story. So now we've gotten to this climax and the most exciting part where the turning point is taking place and we're looking to see what's happened with Rosie that gets her all the way to the end. So they worked till the sun sneaked away to its bed, and Aunt Rose tied her headscarf around Rosie's head and sent her to sleep with a smile ear to ear to dream the bold dreams of a great engineer. Okay, so Rosie and her aunt had worked all day, so that was the next event there. Okay, let's see. Oh, you know what? It wasn't the next event. What happened before that event? This is what readers do, guys. You go back, you think about it. There was another event I missed over here. It says Rosie began planning a better way for her aunt. So that happened, and then they worked all day. So she had the plan here, and then they worked all day. So as a reader, whenever I look at things like this, I need to make sure that I'm following those events and I'm going back and checking myself using the text. Notice I'm a teacher and I'm even going back and checking myself in the text. That's what you should be doing as a student and as a strong reader. All right, so Blue River Creek, all the kids in grade 2, sorry, this is not all the way on the screen. At Blue River Creek, all the kids in grade 2 build gizmos and gadgets and doohickeys too. With each perfect failure, they all stand and cheer, but none quite as proud as Rosie Revere. So there's that proud part there so that we know that's the ending. We know that is the resolution. That now that problem of her, being shy about her inventions and giving up is gone because she's proud of herself and she got her confidence back. And it's very clear and evident in the end. So one thing somebody might argue and say, well, the resolution, it shouldn't be done. And I did it too. I got to the end of this book and I'm like, well, did her aunt ever fly? But then I stopped and thought about it and I'm like, it doesn't matter. That's not the problem in the story. It's not about her aunt. It's all about Rosie and how she had lost that confidence in herself. So sometimes as readers, it can be a little difficult to identify the problem and identify that climax in the story. But that's why rereading and looking back and really deeply thinking about what that character is doing and what the author is trying to tell us is really important. So now that I've done all of this work, then I'm going to put it into my categories. Okay, so I'm going to use this to do that. So we got our climax for sure, right? It's right here. Now, I'm not going to rewrite all of that because that's just too much. You guys got to drag and drop it into some boxes. So I'm just simply going to say that the number 6 event was the climax because I put a number 6 next to it. And then I'm going to go back here. I'm going to say, okay, the exposition was number 1. It was Rosie Revere sat in Lila Green's classroom. That was the beginning of the story. In Lila Green's classroom, right? And the problem and the conflict was this event right here. Rosie was shy about her inventions. So I'm going to take that number off there because it wasn't a numbered event. Rosie was shy about her inventions and gave up on sharing them with the world. The problem wasn't her uncle laughing at her. The problem wasn't her aunt trying to get her to fly. The problem was she gave up on her dreams. She gave up on things that were a part of her and who she was. She was stashing that away in the attic. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. And it's the problem that was throughout the whole book. It wasn't just one event in the book. That's another thing to think about. The attic, stashing her stuff in the attic. And then it happened again when she called her invention, and then it happened again when her uncle laughed at her, and then it happened again whenever she still had a little bit more, but yet she was still calling her inventions a name as she was bringing it out, and then it happened again when her aunt laughed at her. So it's something that happens over and over again, and she's just that confidence is being crushed. So that's another thing to think about is when you're choosing the problem in a story, it's not something that just happens once. It's something that's underlying throughout the whole story. Then whenever you went to go put your rising actions into order, all you should have done, guys, is, so clearly this is the exposition here. And then all you had to do, if you would have followed directions, I told you to write all this down and then number them. I know it would take some work, but it's worth the time. Then all you had to do was drag these in order. So this would have been the second one. This would have been the third one. This would have been the fourth one. Okay. And then we had our fifth, and then this is the fifth one. She came to visit. And then we had our climax. And that climax is the turning point. And then from the turning point on is the falling actions. So then we would have went into the falling action. She had this happen, talked about their failures. She began her plan. And then they worked all day. And then our resolution, of course, the ending is when she got that pride back in herself. So I just wanted to go over that with you guys. Hopefully that makes more sense now. This is a definite strategy that you can use. The events aren't always going to be given to you. Most of the time they're not. So when you're reading a story, think about what are the important events in that story and how can you note them and how can you plot them onto a story plot organizer that you can make for yourself to help you better understand your books. I hope that you enjoyed this story because I thought it was awesome. And thank you for listening all the way to the end of this lesson, and enjoy just reading on your level up books for your assignment today. Bye, guys.